Coming as no surprise to anyone, in last place is Alberic du Bordelot. His faction starts in Bordelot, which is central in the Bretonnian coastline. The vampires to the north pose your starting threat, but aside from that, there isn't really anyone else nearby. There are greenskins in Massive Orcal that you can go after while you grind your way to confederations, but aside from that, Bretonnia is one of those factions that you really have to go out and find the battle rather than it coming to you most of the time. For their faction effects, they gain 25% bonus income from trade, +2 to recruit rank, and -1 to recruit duration for all Bretonnian knight units. For his army effects, he starts with the Knight's Vow unlocked, gains 10 chivalry, and grants 10 melee defense for Knights of the Realm. For his starting units, he gains Knights of the Realm, which are a mid-tier shock cavalry unit, Knights Errant, which are an early-game shock cavalry unit, and Foot Squires, which are a late-game greatsword infantry. Alberic starts the campaign on a barded warhorse and is a mounted shock cavalry lord. He has decent armor and HP, so can be semi-tough in combat, and he does decent damage with a bonus versus large and a quite nice charge bonus, which makes him a very good choice for cycle charging to take on enemy monsters. His melee stats are okay, but not the best, and if he gets pinned down, he'll start to get melted before long. He can get a couple of flying mounts with Tempete, his Hippogriff being the best, and granting him more HP, speed, and armor-piercing damage. Finally, with all items and abilities, he grants buffs for himself and allies, as well as a bound ability, and the reasoning for his rank. He doesn't have the worst starting location in the faction, but it's definitely not the best, since he does have a reasonably hard starting war compared to the others. The income from trade is top-notch, and he can earn a huge amount of coin, and the buffs for knights allow you to recruit some of the best units in the faction faster, but this will only help if you're in a rush. He only starts with one vow, which means more of those side quests to do, and the buffs to the units aren't used in the end of the game, so they run out quite quickly. He's a decent fighter, but not as strong as the other ones, seeing as he doesn't have either magic, a really cool mount, or fabulous hair. Coming in third place, and this is going to be a controversial one, is King LOUEN. His faction starts in Castle Couronne. This is at the top of the Bretonnian coastline, with the north exposed to the coastline, which Norsca will eventually work their way down to attack. But once you have 2 or more armies, you can handle it quite nicely. Other than that, you are free to take out the nearby greenskins and vampires, whilst confederating your Bretonnian allies. For his faction effects, he grants 10% to campaign move range, and +50% to leadership aura size for all lords when attacking. For his personal army, LOUEN starts with all knightly vows completed, gains 10 chivalry, and grants 8 melee attack and 12 leadership when fighting versus undead, greenskins, and all chaos. For his starting units, he gains a Field Trebuchet, which is a basic armor-piercing artillery piece, Knights of the Realm, which are a mid-tier shock cav unit, and Pegasus Knights, which are a speedy mid-tier flying cav. LOUEN himself is another mounted shock cavalry lord that starts aboard a barded warhorse. He has a good chunk of HP and armor, so can be very tough to take down. He has decent weapon damage, though not overly armor-piercing, but has a great charge bonus and nice melee stats. He can upgrade his mount to Bequeath, a flying hippogriff that grants him a load more health and damage, as well as obviously flying speed. With all his items and abilities, he's granted regeneration, buffs for himself and allies, and debuffs for enemies. Now, the reason for his rank, he does have an extremely strong starting location, with the only real threat being Norsca and maybe Rikarth, but 9 times out of 10, they'll just send a single army and then die. It is a very boring faction with decent faction effects that always get use, but don't make as much of an impact as they should. Getting all the knightly vows right out the gate is great, but other than that, you're not really getting much unless you're battling versus specific factions that you often aren't. LOUEN is probably the best fighter in the faction, since he's just so damn tough and can do so much damage that it is sometimes questionable if you can kill him at all. Really, the reason for him being so low is because while he is very strong and very easy, the others are just so much easier and so much stronger. Turns out Bretonnia, they're all quite an even power level. But first, introducing the brand new Empire Strikes Back, no relation, merch from COLONELDAMNEDERS.store. This fabulous design is crammed full of details and characters from everyone's favourite faction, the Vampire Counts. This ambitious crossover combines your favourite characters into a movie poster inspired by the sci-fi classic Battle Beyond the Stars. You can pick up this design on a poster, t-shirt, or even a hoodie, and then you too can become a fashion icon. Here's what one satisfied customer had to say.
Oh yeah, I think it's bloody great. Can I have my 20 quid now?
To top it all off, you could also win some of these items for absolutely free.
It's time for some free shit!
Simply join the Taurox Rampage competition today. All details to this are in the description. Otherwise, if you're interested in supporting this here YouTube channel, whilst also decorating yourself and your walls with the hottest design this side of Sylvania, then head on over to COLONELDAMNEDERS.store today, or click the first link in the description. And now we'll return you to your regularly scheduled programming. Coming in second place, we have REPANSE de LYONESSE, and I'd like to take this moment to apologise for my French pronunciation. Her starting location is Kofa, which is on the northwest tip of the desert. She has a potential ally to the south, but aside from that, it is a lot of vampires, beastmen, and Tomb King nearby to attack you at a moment's notice. This starting location is a little less secure than the Bretonnian coastline, but once you get in control, you'll have a lot of expansion to do since there are so many enemies down there. For her faction effects, she grants 3 control for all provinces, -50% upkeep for all heroes, +8 melee defense for questing knights, and -80 relations factions with Vampire Counts, Coast, and Tomb Kings. For her personal army, she starts with the Knight's Vow and the Questing Vow unlocked. She gains 10 Chivalry and grants 5% physical resist and 5 leadership for all peasant units. For her starting units, she gains Questing Knights, which are a mid-game battling cav, Foot Squires, which are a late-game greatsword infantry, and Knights of the Realm, which are a mid-tier shock cavalry unit. REPANSE herself starts on her Suleiman mount, and this makes her into a hybrid shock and fighting cav unit that can do some great damage in the charge, as well as the following combat. She has great armor piercing damage, with a bonus versus infantry, and brilliant melee stats. She's fairly tough, with great armor and a decent amount of HP, meaning she can stay in those lines for an extremely long time. She has no other mounts other than Suleiman, and with all items and abilities, she grants buffs to herself and allies, as well as an explosion around herself. Now, the reasoning for her rank, she has probably the hardest starting location, since there are just so many dang enemies nearby, but that being said, LYONESSE will just eat him for breakfast. Her faction effects are nice for buffing some great cav units that you'll want to be using plenty in the mid-game, as well as getting any heroes you want on the go for half the cost. Her army effects are pretty neat, taking peasant units from useless chaff into useless chaff with more leadership and resistance, which is great. She also gets a couple of the vows done for her, so you can miss out on some of those annoying side quests. She's a great fighter, if a little limited, with no magic or another mount, meaning she's pretty much as good as she's going to get when you start the campaign. Finally, in first place, we have the lord that is so easy, it's so boring that you don't want to play her, Faye the Enchantress. Her faction starts in Carcassonne. This is at the south end of the Bretonnian coastline before it melts into Estalia. Her starting war is versus the Dreadfleet, who are miles away and will give you plenty of time to prepare for them to attack if they even make it that far. Aside from that, you can head south and fight Ikit if you hate yourself, or head north to take on the Greenskins and eventually vampires. To be honest, you can pretty much just sit and wait until you can confederate the other Bretonnians, because there's not really much to do that's immediately close to you. For a faction effect, she has the Image of the Lady, which grants plus 5 peasants available to the faction, and a plus 15% to casualty replenishment rate. For a personal army, she gains 10 chivalry, greatly reduced upkeep for Grail Guardians. Don't know why it doesn't give you an actual number here, but I believe it basically means she doesn't suffer the penalty from not having the vow completed. Her starting units are a Blessed Field Trebuchet, which is an enchanted artillery unit with magical attacks and an inability to hit your own units. Grail Guardians, which are top-tier battling cav, and Battle Pilgrims, which are tanky frontline sword infantry. Faye is a floating spellcasting lord with access to the Law of Life. She really isn't the toughest, with low HP and armor, so you should keep her out of combat if at all possible. She does have magical attacks, so if there are some low damage units with physical resistance, then she might not be too bad. She can get on the Silveron mount to grant her some more speed, charge bonus, and of course HP, and all her items and abilities grant her regeneration, buffs for herself and allies, debuffs for enemies, and a bound damaging ability. Now, the reasoning for her being in first place is that she has the easiest starting location by a mile, since no one comes to fight her, meaning she can just sit around and do what she wants rather than having to react. The high capacity of her peasant units is quality, getting more of those ever so useful units to pad out your lines. The replenishment is always useful, no matter what and who is making use of it. The army effects are a little bit naff, but being able to use Grail Knights without the vow is pretty nice, and we all know how much I hate those stupid side quests. She is a powerful casting lord with the ability to support her army, both with active damage and an array of buffs, and while she may not be a great fighter, on the mount, she's not quite as terrible. And there we go, that concludes my ranking for the Bretonnian Legendary Lords. Let me know how my ranking compared to yours in the comments. If you want to see more videos like this, then definitely be sure to consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks to all supporters of this channel, in particular Kobe Said So, for his fantastic support at the Unclean Ones tier. If you want to get on this end screen, then the details are in the description. One more time, thank you for watching, and for now, I've been COLONELDAMNEDERS, and I will see you next turn.